DH, short-term teams, financial support, prayer support, specific short-term teams, specific interns. What are you looking for? So Jim.
Okay, so there's a few things, like DH and I are new in Flagstaff, so we would love to have teammates. I don't think MTW,
And by that you mean long-term?
we would like long-term, yeah, we want, like, it's me and DH, you know? And we have a great church, we're involved in the PCA church up there, and feel very supported and don't feel alone there at all, but we would love to have, you know, co-laborers working with us with MTW there long term. Two of our immediate needs right now, one is for a mercy ministry that we're trying to develop, which involves wood hauling and wood cutting for fire, like wood stoves. The folks at Rincon got us kick-started with that at VBS this summer. Their kids threw a lot of money at that project. And so we're developing that. So that's sort of like special gift opportunity through there. One of the other opportunities that MTW is changing their pay structure so that missionary wives can begin taking a salary, so that wives can also build Social Security and have benefits in retirement, all that kind of thing as well. And so different families are able to choose what they want to do with that opportunity, but we chose for me to also be able to take a salary, because DH and I are very much a team effort in our family. So yeah, so that means that we have a little bit more support to raise. So monthly ongoing support is another need for us. And prayer, of course. I would love for all of you to be praying for us on the regular if you're not already. So yeah.
Do you have any of the long-term missionaries, are they any in the pipeline right now going through training and support?
We do not yet. There was one couple that we were in conversation with earlier, but they decided not to do it. So yeah, God was leading them in other ways. Yeah.
The pay structure, the new pay structure change is that Em was talking about is, I think it's a very big deal. I think that what MTW is doing, and I'd like to welcome MTW into the 1970s when it comes to how they pay missionaries. And what Emily talked about is a big deal as far as paying into Social Security. You would have a missionary couple that's on the field for years, and MTW doesn't say the man has to take the paycheck.
Yeah.
But 99% of spousal units have a man take the paycheck. And I'll give you another example as to why that was relevant. So my wife's a nurse, and when she was in Honduras, she built 2 clinics, and she was treating 3,000 patients a year, and she was doing all kinds of incredible work. And we came on furlough, and we lived in Phoenix, and she decided she was going to work at Phoenix Children's Hospital. And so she made up her resume and went to go apply for the job, and they said, well, so you were a nurse manager at a pediatric oncology unit back in 2007. What have you done since then? Well, I don't have pay stubs, but I built a clinic, I designed a clinic, I stocked the pharmacy, I got 100 doctors and nurses to come work for me, we treated 3,000 patients a year. So you didn't work. Well, no, I just told you what I did, but you didn't get a paycheck. So we just can't include any of that, because it's not really our real job. So we're just gonna act like you have no job experience for the last 7 years. And so that's a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, for someone to say, for the men in the room, put yourself in that shoes. You've not worked for 7 years. It's demeaning. It's hard to work on employment. So I think that's a big deal for them to be moving into that direction. It's pretty exciting. Jim, what about you? What are you recruiting for, looking for?
Yeah.
Trying to.
So we need financial support as well, and you guys explained it really well. We came back, every time we come back from HMA, there's a certain amount that we have to raise in addition, because.
What's HMA do?
Huh?
What's HMA?
Home mission assignment. Sorry.
Like in normal missions.
Normal human, okay.
Normal missions, it's called furlough.
Right. So every time period that we come back, we usually have to raise another like 10% or so. And so this time around, we came back needing another 15% because over time, for various reasons, somebody loses a job or retires or whatever, we get some drop in our support. And so this time we came back with 15% that we need to raise as well. But in addition, with the new compensation plan, which is really good, completely agree with that, that raises it to another 15%. So we're having to raise probably another 30% before going back. And I think we got 10% raised. We need another 20% before being able to go back in December. We're going to start focusing on individuals as well. I think we've sort of started to run out of time for churches. Because when you ask a church, there's a more deliberating process. So hopefully the folks in this room will make it quicker. Well, I'm working it today. No, but okay. For some reason, I feel really comfortable today in this a good group. Yeah, anyway, that's personal support stuff. We have so many different kinds of ministries in Australia and our region that it's hard to really single out just a few. Often, and also, mission field is so vast and workers are so few. I often say, if you have a heart for the gospel work overseas, then we can use pretty much almost anybody. And the issue is not the gift sets and the specific job, because there's definitely something for everybody to do. I think we need everyone from youth ministry, children's ministry, college ministry, to art, music, to church planting, to pioneering work, as well as joining an existing team, all those things. The challenge, I think, for our part of the world is actually visa issue. Australia and New Zealand are notoriously difficult to acquire visas. So actually what we need the most are seasoned people who might be looking at missions as second career thing, because we have a lot of young people. They just need more mentors and disciplers. So we're looking for maybe more seasoned people to join us, but
experience, mission experience in life.
Yeah, with life experience. But Australia and New Zealand are very biased towards older people applying for a visa. So it's easier for younger people to get visa, but it's more difficult for older people to get visa. But we really want older people to come. So it's kind of challenging. So we are now starting to offer short-term mission trips, vision trips, and all those things that I couldn't offer before. Before I was doing so many different hands-on ministries, I couldn't make programs available for folks interested. But now we have administrator and young people who rose up to leadership, and there's more room to invite others to join us now. Like earlier, I was kind of like breastfeeding, if you will. Like I'm just up to my eyebrows with immediate stuff. I couldn't share the ministry with other people. But I think we're in a good place where we can invite more people to come see what we're doing, start visioning together about what they might do as individuals or even for teams to come through. So yeah, we're available for anything, really. Yeah. And we have about 4 missionaries in the pipeline to various places, but they're all having visa issues, and they can't come in. We have missionaries who have all their supports raised, who can't come in right now because of COVID, all the lockdown. So please pray for them to be able to make it in.
Emily, do you have an estimate of what that wood splitting ministry, what you need yet financially to have that ready to go?
DH has a better handle on the amount, but like we thought we were only going to need like $1,200 for the wood splitter, but it's really like $20,000 for the wood splitter, and we need a storage shed, and we need a trailer, but the best would be a hydraulic trailer, so that's like $10,000 or $12,000. It's a lot. Yeah, because we want to be able to have the kind of equipment that's going to last, and be a little bit more heavy duty, since we'll be cutting and hauling for many families. Yeah. Sorry, I don't have like a solid number for you. Yeah. Yeah.
So she just touched on how they're treating the body while saving the soul. What are some examples of how you're doing that in Australia and the islands?
Our mercy ministry portion comes mainly with asylum seekers and refugee people. As far as Australian residents, citizens, it's mostly the saving the soul part. It's preaching the gospel rightly, helping them to understand and receive Christ, actively participate in discipleship, and getting involved in missions, ministry, those things. But also locally, we partner with IJM, International Justice Mission, as well as international teams that does a lot of refugee ministries. So in Australia, there's a lot of talks about Indonesian boat people who land in Australian shores, and they have issues about that, and there's constant reporting about that. But actually, churches are really involved in that situation, because churches actually have more of an insight as to what that's about. Actually, it's not the Indonesians who come in illegally per se, but it's actually the Iranians who go to Indonesia first, and then they take illegal boats to come to Australia, because they're seeking religious freedom and political asylum. So they don't talk about that very much. I don't know why. Australian news doesn't say these are Middle Eastern people, but it's actually the Middle Eastern nationals who come through that route to Australia. So Australian churches are big on advocating for refugees and asylum seekers, and reaching out to these Muslim population and sharing about the gospel. Iran is coming to Christ like crazy right now. I mean, there's like Muslim conversion happening more now than ever before, and Iran is probably the main country, but there's also severe persecution, and that's where they flee to Indonesia, and then they come to Australia. Yeah. So we have our church has a program where we have several people committed to working with international teams, and we keep in touch with several families on a regular basis, and also we do yearly camps with them for like 10 days, I think, and then during those camps they get to actually hear the gospel, and our young people go and just hang out with the kids and build relationship that way. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, like in a practical sense, what is the process for someone who wants to be a missionary?
Process?
Yeah, like say someone wanted to have a Friday.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one great thing MTW is doing now is to position hubs in various parts of the country. And so if you get in touch with someone like Mike, he'll put you in touch with, or whether it's you or someone else, he'll put them in touch with the recruiter. We don't say recruiter, we say, what's the term? Candidate specialist. And then that person will stay in touch with that individual.
Recruit them.
Yeah, and recruit them. Providing applications, walking them through the whole process. Yeah, so probably getting in touch with Mike is the best thing to do.
Yeah, that's literally what the new regional offices that were born about 4 years ago is for a pastor to say, I got someone in my congregation that's interested in missions, what do I do, who do I call? And the answer is always your regional guy. And and then individuals, same thing, someone wants to do a short-term team, same thing, someone wants to do an internship, 2-year program, someone wants to figure out how to financially support Missionary or get on their prayer distribution list and all that. That's literally what the hub, the concept of the hub is that those kind of weird Southeasterners that have that weird Southeast culture and us awesome Western people, we're different culture, right? And so it's we all, I theoretically
Well, I can't, I grew up in the southeast.
Yeah.
He's-
He saw the light.
What's the name?
We figured out that grits is not grits, it's hominy out here, right?
You mean polenta?
Oh, right, yeah.
Polenta, yeah. Any other questions?
So Jim, you were saying, talking about island to island ministry, and your region has got to be maybe the biggest region
Yeah, I think so.
geographically.
We have a lot of water and fish.
But that also adds to the difficulty, right, of maintaining or starting the ministry, keeping, getting people connected. Can you tell us what your experience has been?
Yes, yes. So, yeah, it's a big thing to tackle. We are trying to build a team that is dedicated to eye to eye. So we have 4 people on the team right now. I'm part of that now, but I'm trying to get this set up and then get out of it. And I would just continue to support it as a regional, on a regional level. But whoever makes up the team for eye to eye specifically would have the support of the 4 denominations, making themselves available. And then the team's responsibility is to assess the needs of the islands and to connect them to the resource that's presented by the 4 denominations. So, for example, theological education. Who can use theological education in the islands, and who can provide theological education? And the great thing about our 4 denominations, 4 Presbyterian denominations, is that you have no shortage of educated people. So that's an area that a lot of people are interested in, theological education and church planting. While we're only a few, we're also partnering with local representatives from each of these islands, and they're also helping us to assess and to implement needs and resource connection. We're asking ourselves, how can we do this differently from how they've done things in the past, where the colonial system was to do that hierarchical thing, convert the chief and the rest will follow. Instead, now we're aiming for more grassroots. How do we do that? And thankfully, I think technology is going to help a lot. So some of the ideas that we're employing are borrowed from, say, like, dating websites, eHarmony. But how can we become the discipleship gospel version of eHarmony, where we can serve as a middle network hub between the needs assessed, identified, with all the resources that are available? So how do we connect them, but also manage that connecting point so that we can assist the terms of their engagement, curate the content with which they engage with each other, things like that. So one of the ideas we toss around is, how can we maybe turn this into like an internet company, if you will, where we specialize in gospel networking. And if this works here, then we can actually translate this to other parts of the world and different mission sites. So we're kind of excited about this. We're getting some techies involved. But there's also a big part of our partnership who are not entirely bought into this online kind of idea. They want to do more traditional way. And I'm not going to really debate too much about that. I think it remains to be seen. It depends on how the new Eye to Eye team forms. And if I could kind of impose, some of my ideas onto this, it'd be more like an online thing. But if the more traditional side wins out, I'm okay with that too. But I don't see myself doing Eye to Eye only for the long haul. I thought about that, but there's still too many things that we started in Sydney that needs to be kept going for a while. I think we're excited about what we started, but it needs to get to a point where it gets sustained. So I need to probably focus more on Sydney. But as I oversee the region, I just want to make sure that I2I team gets formed and they have a direction and they start going. And until then, I'll be involved more hands-on. I'm not sure if I answered your question, did I?
Yeah, I think you did.
Okay.
And more.
Okay.
Just a picture, how big is your church in Sydney?
We're about 100, but our college ministry minister to about 200 students per week. And I always say, like, I haven't had a chance to really do church yet, because I've been doing college ministries from Monday to Saturday for the past, since we started. Only in the last 2 years that I handed over to our interim director that I didn't have to do as much on campus. But because of that, we're doing all this stuff during the weekdays with college students, so church was almost like a weekend thing, just a weekend. And but now I feel like we have an opportunity to really focus just on church. And these are really well-discipled people through college ministry. So, part of the church struggle is always, when new people come in, how do we take care of them? How do we disciple them? And how do we grow them? But if the leadership to new membership ratio is not good, then it's difficult. But I feel like we're well prepared for a lot of new people to come in. So I do feel like we're poised for the next level, and we're all kind of excited about that. Yeah.
Let's go to the ethereal for a second. Just talk about missions philosophy and theory. What do you guys think of short-term teams as missionaries? We're taking short-term trips.
I think prepared well, it could be very powerful.
What does that mean? Prepared well? How is it prepared well?
Depends on why and why you're bringing them in and what you're doing with them. So it could really turbocharge something where you need extra personnel for a limited period of time. If you want to make a strong charge towards something, they could be very helpful. But also, you're bringing them in so you can expose them to future things too, right? So if you can incubate a dream, a vision, and they can take that home and continue to cultivate that for long-term missions, it's fantastic. I'm sure you've heard many stories on how short-terms go wrong too, and there's a whole book on that, like When Helping Hurts, and as well as a host of other books. So as long as you're doing it intentionally, and you know what you're after, and there's good cooperation between the field missionary and the team that's coming in, it could be great. Yeah.
So you mean you don't like someone to come into the ministry that the Lord's put you in charge of and say that they're going to run things for a week?
Not too much.
Emily, what's your experience?
It's a lot of work as the missionary to host a team. It's a ton of work.
Sure.
And for us, like we're, still fairly new in our work, and so for us, we're like, we don't know what we need people to do because we just got here, and so why don't you paint our living room, because that's what we need, and I think in our context, because the Navajo people have been inundated with short-term teams, we kind of we didn't want people to come right away. We were like, if you're coming, come to serve our family first. And then if you plan to come back again and again and again and again and again, so you can build relationships with our people here, then we can talk about you building relationships with our people. But no, you can't just come as a stranger and do a VBS. Sorry, you're gonna have to show us that you're gonna keep coming back, And we were really blessed by some of the churches that came and did real practical things for our family. And then they were able to meet a couple of our friends and hear some great stories and testimonies from some of our Navajo connections. So I have mixed emotions about it. I think part of how God called me into ministry was through the short-term trips that I took. So I think, like Jim said, you need to know what your motivation is and what you're on about with taking a trip. And you can be honest about the fact that, like, if you're bringing a group of junior hires, like, it's really for their development. Like, it's really for their walk with the Lord. It's really for what God's doing in their lives. Like, yeah, they're going to hopefully be a blessing to the people they're going to, but, yeah. So, I can tell two stories, of a really good example. There's a high school in Northern California that they have a class that's dedicated to their spring break missions trip. These students have to apply to be able to go on the trip, and the entire semester they're preparing for the trip. So they're learning about culture, they're learning about service, they're learning about leadership, they're learning about sacrifice, they're memorizing scripture, they're preparing for months beforehand. And going on this spring break trip is like part of their grade, it's part of their project. So these high schoolers come and they are ready to do whatever is asked of them. And they're amazing. And this same group comes every single year. And everybody looks forward to this group coming, because they're well prepared, they're ready to work hard, they're there to serve, and a lot of these kids are like feeling called into missions or ministry in some way. So that's like one of the best experiences we had with a short-term team. One of the worst experiences that we had with a short-term team was when this team, they would come and do really good construction projects, which was great. But one year they sort of tricked the ministry into letting them turn one of the buildings into a wash house. And I was like, why do we need a wash house? Which is like showers and washing machines and dryers. And I'm like, who's gonna manage that? Who's gonna fix the machines when they're broken? Who's gonna fix the plumbing when it goes bad? Who's gonna have the keys? You know, who's gonna be in charge of this? This is something that we have to take care of. But I came to find out that this missions team just wanted a place to take showers and do their laundry when they came to do construction. And I was so mad. I was like, how did they trick you guys into letting them? This is all about them. This has nothing to do with the Navajo people. So that's an example of like, don't do that. Like, stay at a hotel and take a shower at a hotel. Like, don't steal a building from a mission campus for your...
You're both saying
Yeah.
different ways. There's a right way and there's a wrong way.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So Jim probably remembers about the same time we got started in the same ballpark, 2007 was me, right? You were,
Sounds 6, yeah.
yeah. There was a time where MTW would kind of strong arm missionaries. It was never, no long-term missionary in MTW was ever forced to take a short-term team. But there were times when it was highly encouraged, because it was an administrative fee cash cow for MTW. And that's changed with the new director. That doesn't happen. So there was a time where MTW would put out about 7,000 two-week missionaries every year. And it funded a lot of programs. And so missionaries were kind of like, come on, Jim, you don't just need 2 teams, you need like 5 teams, don't you? And that existed. But now, the thing Emily and Jim are not, I don't want to say different ends of the spectrum, that's not what I'm trying to imply. They have 2 views, and there's multiple views in the spectrum of short-term mission. But the great thing about MTW right now is that there's no long-term missionary that is receiving missionaries, short-term missionaries, that doesn't want them.
That's good.
And so if you are considering a short-term trip, your church is considering a short-term trip, know that the long-term missionary is saying that's something that we want, that's something that benefits our ministry. So like Emily said, there's the definite way to not benefit the ministry, but they're not gonna allow that to happen anymore. And Jim said he was looking for some very specific people in short-term missions. So MTW has the whole spectrum of long-term missionaries when it comes to short-term trips. That there are, I would say, Jim, a majority of long-term missionaries don't want short-term trips. Would that be a fair statement? Or
I don't know.
a plurality, a big number?
Yeah, I haven't done a survey to know
Yeah.
that.
A lot don't.
A lot that I know actually want it,
Yeah, yeah.
but I've heard from others that they don't want it, so. Yeah.
And some choose to, they just don't want them.
Mm.
And others say, I want tons and tons and
Mm.
tons and tons. And others say, I want one or two teams, or I want a very specific skill set. And I think the thing that we can say is that if your church is considering a short-term trip, if MTW is advertising it, or these guys are advertising it, it's something that they want. So that's something I think you definitely can feel comfortable knowing. Yeah. Let's switch gears again. Why MTW? What drew you to MTW? What kept you with MTW?
Well, mine's sort of an easy answer because I was ordained with the PCA, and I really didn't have to look farther. We have an agency within, so it made a lot of sense for me to just go with the missions arm. And I say arm because it's an extension of our denomination, so we don't feel like we're independent missionaries with an independent agency, but rather we're a representative of what the PCA does. It affects our theology, doctrine, ministry ethos, and we have some really good stuff to offer, I think. One example is, like, every church talks about grace, but I think over the past few decades, I think PC America really grew in our understanding of the application of the doctrine of grace, more than just justification, but in sanctification. And so I think we actually immediately had that to offer in Australia, especially with conservative denominations. They know the doctrine of grace in justification, but it kind of stops there, and it's all works from that point on. But to be able to say, no, like everything we do in life, and it's all grace constantly. I think, and that's been a good contribution to Australian Christianity. Yeah.
You'd be so bold as to try to dumb that down. Theological and practical purity. So you and your family chose the PCA because of the views, the theological views and the practical views of
Yes.
the PCA, and that's an extension of that.
Yeah, very much.
It's similar for us. We worked 5 years with an interdenominational mission, and wanting to go in the direction of facilitating church planting, because same like Jim said, DH is ordained in the PCA, and one of the things that we feel like would be really healthy for the church on the Navajo Nation is the church government structure in the PCA denomination, that there's accountability, that one of the things we see a lot is either Navajo pastors being abused by their congregations, or Navajo pastors having not enough accountability, and there's no checks and balances for them, and so we think just the structure of the church would be a really healthy thing to introduce into the church on the Navajo Nation, and the theology, and in Navajo culture, there's in traditional religion, it's a very works-based, works-oriented worldview, and they've been impacted largely by Catholic missionaries and by Mormon missionaries, which are also very works-based and works-oriented worldviews. And so the idea of salvation being by grace and faith alone, and that, it dismantles a lot of the pressure that's on them of all the do's and don'ts in their traditional worldviews.
But you guys don't want to monopolize everything.
Well, MTW is great. I mean, I don't.
We love it too.
Yeah. But what we love the most about MTW is the community of other missionaries. Yeah. And just even listening to Emily earlier while I was sitting there, yeah, it's a crazy life.
Yeah, it is.
But to be in a community of other crazies,
Yeah. You don't feel so crazy.
Yeah, you don't feel so crazy. But at least you have a community of crazies, and that's been really, really good. Yeah. So being a part of an organization that's grounded in scriptures, but at the same time passionate about missions, it's a rare combination, I feel like. And to be with other people who are like that, to be supported by one another like that, it's been a really rich experience. Yeah.
MTW takes care of their missionaries really well too. That's a big deal for us. Being well cared for, being poured into, being invested in, is they do a really good job, and we're really thankful for that.
I'll speak into my sin. You guys don't have to acknowledge this or take credit for it in any way, shape, or form. What Jim was saying about missionaries being the crazies and being associated with other crazies is two aspects of that. Is that we would say on our missions team, we had a large number of long-term missionaries on our team, and someone would say, Jim in Australia? No, who's Jim? Well, I mean, he's a missionary, and that's missionary speak for, you know what that means, right? He's a missionary. It's a little weird, right? and all missionaries get that. It's like, yeah, every missionary is a little weird. The reality is being raised in the rustic Western world like we all have been, to walk away from earning potential and security and family is very contrary to the Western world. And so it takes a special kind of crazy to do that.
Yeah.
And then that leads into the camaraderie where only another missionary knows how weird your life is and how strange it is. And so you can oftentimes come into a church and socialize with folks in the church, and someone introduces, oh, Bob over there in the corner, he was a missionary for 10 years. Like, I gotta go hang out with Bob. He's the only one in this room that's gonna
It's gonna
understand.
get me.
And it's a weird fraternal, awesome thing that community of missionaries is really it's a warm blanket sometimes. There are plenty more questions, but don't worry about that. Is the training and the evaluation that you guys have to go through, is that excessive? Is that a lot of poking and prodding? Did you feel it was too much or just right or not enough?
I think it's fabulous. And it is a lot. Like when you asked earlier, like what's the process? Like you gotta be ready for like a 15-page application and several interviews and like to bare your soul about every secret sin you have. Like you have to be ready to do that. But, and some people might say it's excessive, but I think it's way better to do all that work before they send you overseas to make sure that not only are you professionally, spiritually, theologically, but also psychologically and emotionally prepared to go abroad and to be, the face of the church and the gospel to another people group. It's better to do that before than to send you and to have your life fall apart, or to have you struggle with really significant things and risk marring the gospel in the eyes of, your host culture. It's better to do the work before than to send you and say, oops, we didn't know that he was a drug dealer. Oops, we didn't know that he actually is struggling with his sexuality. We didn't know that. And now there's like this unraveling. And those are two real examples. Like I'm not making those up, So I think it's fabulous. And you have to be pretty hardy to get through it, which is part of the preparation, really. I don't know what you think, but.
Yeah. My wife would say the exact same things. I'm a simpler person, so I could have probably used less. But it's like what they say about like preparation. It's always better to be over prepared than under. I'm the type to under prepare, but in order to accommodate my wife, over preparation is satisfying for her, and I'm just kind of okay with that.
I think your wife and I could be friends.
I'll go along with it.
Yeah, yeah.
So, if being with, other crazies is a warm blanket, then what are the struggles or, I mean, there's gotta be times, even like for you, Jim, being on a team, where you still feel some isolation or loneliness, and then maybe even more so for you guys, because you are the team.
Yeah.
So what is that like, and what are those struggles like for, and how can we support our missionaries? How can we support our crazy people?
Nowadays we call it self-care,
Yeah.
but you know, for Christians that just means like walk with the Lord, right? I mean, you're not alone. You're with God. Maybe just as people, we are the product of our age, and we just need a lot more help and support than we ever used to. We know that missionaries who came before us went through way harder stuff, and they did not have the kind of support that we have today. So at some point, I think we missionaries do need to keep in mind that ultimately it's not the missions organizations or other support, but we're not going to be understood. We're going to be mistreated at times. We're transiting through this place, right? So I think I'm just sort of preaching to myself right now, I think, because there aren't always ways to reach out and fix things and get supported and get things fixed. So, yeah, I think we just have to make sure that we walk with the Lord. For me, it was that and taking up surfing. I turned 50, and then my midlife crisis was surfing. And you know, it takes a lot more investment of time and scheduling of the time to make more friends and maintain that relationship. I thought, I'm just going to paddle out and sit at the lineup and then get some nature therapy. You got to figure out a way to cope in various ways. At the end of the day, your ultimate net is Christ. And then other stuff, we just got to figure out along the way, whether it's surfing, camping, or I do have a small group of friends, and that's been a safety network as well. Few people you call executive prayer team? Elite prayer warriors. And then, but you know what? Honestly, I've experienced betrayal even within that group. So sometimes it's a huge help having a small unit, but if one or two people don't jive with you at some point, then there's a break in fellowship with that as well. So I think ultimately, there is an ultimate thing here, but ultimately God is good. So there's a purpose in continuing until the very end, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think self-care, yeah, that's sort of jargon these days, I guess. But I would agree with everything that Jim said. And I think if you're in a team, you have to find a way to also like have fun together and unplug and not just be doing work together all the time. And that helps so that the friendships can grow and that you're not just, you know, grind at the grind of ministry and work and labor all the time together, but to have fun together and just enjoy being together as a team. That was something that when I was doing collegiate ministry, our staff team would do really well. And they called it mandatory fun sometimes, where you just had to come and hang out and play card games and do goofy stuff together, and it was a blast, and those relationships were so sweet. And so, and that was something that we tried to facilitate in Window Rock with our team too, just be together and have a good time. It really helps. And I think having an outlet is really huge, so that you can de-stress. Like I talked before about how stressful ministry life is, and you have to be able to dump the stress somehow, whether it's through exercise or a creative outlet or a hobby or, something. You have to have something where you can just be. And I think in our situation, we have to reach out because it's just us now. And I think even before, when we were with the team, it wasn't necessarily a like-minded team, so we still kind of had to reach out. So things like presbytery are always a highlight for DH and I. It's often why I come to a lot of them, because it's a chance for me to fellowship with people that are like-minded, and so things like that are a blessing to us.
What about the weight of expectations from supporters? They're supporting you, so we want to hear numbers, we want to hear conversions, we want to hear really good stories.
Yeah, we've lost some supporters because of that. And
You
I
feel
kind
that
of
way?
said, well, good riddance. I don't want you to support us if we're not meeting your expectations for what a missionary should look like. Go support somebody else that will give you the weekly report, because I can't. And I really love the approval of other humans. And so that it is hard. It is hard to feel like, we do have the accountability and kind of the pressure of people are supporting us. So come on, let's do this. But that's not living in the gospel of grace either, right? Thinking that it all depends on us, the missionaries, to get the job done. So, but really, I'm glad to have lost some of those supporters, because that pressure is gone. And we want supporters that are not going to be pulling us off of our bridge. We want supporters that are going to be holding us up. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have sort of an opposite and the same problem in that I think we blew a lot of the expectations out of the water with great field success. But also we've learned over time that those things mean nothing. It's who we're serving and why. Whether you see 0 conversion or discipling 3 college students or hundreds of people came to Christ, the value of a missionary is not in your result, but it's in your commitment to the Lord and whose hand you're holding. And it's God who grows in His time. I think for me, with our constituency, if you will, I think we've run into, interestingly, success fatigue. I think in terms of number of things we've done and people who came to Christ, were discipled, plugged into seminary, plugged into churches. We produce lots of leaders, and there's so many conversions happening every year. I think people are bored of hearing these things, literally. And also, maybe by the way I got introduced to the mission, I'm hugely apprehensive about the field exploitation. So I don't really talk about, we did this, we did that, so over time, I think people just kind of got used to, oh yeah, Jim planted a church, he's doing campus ministries. It just kind of remains in that category. But if I were to talk about stories, it'd be endless, right? Lives. But I think we've sort of run into, I've also I know that it's not my ability, but it's God's timing, God's place. It's what He's doing. And my struggle is I'm not very good at communicating good things that are happening. And also, like my home church and my support, they're kind of used to taking this in as like, oh, that's just normal. It's like, this is not normal, but yet we kind of got used to it, and there's fatigue and familiarity. And now, like, I'm trying to figure out, like, how do I freshly communicate so that people continue to do this journey with us? It's kind of like we're missionally spoiled by the success God's given us. But at the end of the day, it's not about like how much, how little you do, but it's about hearing the calling and walking faithfully and doing each day for God's purpose. And I wish my community would understand that and continue to commit to that journey with us. And yeah, so I'm in a weird place. So yeah.
Couple more questions, and we're gonna transition into a period of prayer for these guys.
Maybe in light of self-help, have you found stories of past missionaries or current books that have been inspirational to you? That you've been reading maybe recently that would be something to maybe share with others that would be an encouragement?
Well, this is a huge popular book nowadays, and I think it's available for free by many churches. It's Gentle and Lowly by Dane Orland. Because, yeah, we just naturally default to legalism and this performance orientation. But I think we need to be convinced in our hearts that Jesus is happy with us. He loves us. He accepts us. And I need to be reminded of that. And I definitely feel like I need to meet up to, if not Christ's expectations, church's expectations, supporters' expectations. It's not so much about like even the field work, but as they like whatever they demand of me on a personal level, how do they expect Jim to be meeting that expectation? And it could be very tiring, right? Yeah. So you sometimes almost want to say, whatever, But I think we need to be reminded that against every odds out there, Christ's default characteristic is that of supreme love and gentleness and affection towards us. And I think I need to be really satisfied of that first before I try to do anything else. That's been huge. It's not a missionary inspirational story, but it's the latest. You were asking kind of about the late things, so yeah.
In our one of our trainings that we did with MTW, Bill Yarborough is one of the veteran MTW missionary guy, and he's the kind of person that I'm like, I need to spend some time around him and people like him, because he talked a lot about the concept of like a rhythm of life, and the idea of slowing down a little bit. I've been reading a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. So some of those ideas and those concepts of like slowing down, connecting with the Lord more regularly throughout your day, and that's really, really hard to do for me personally. So I love people that are like this guy, Bill Yarborough, because I can learn from them a lot, about how to slow down and be a little bit more connected with the Lord. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you guys. Let's go ahead and transition into a time of prayer for these two, their family, their ministry. Can we ask each of you to just take a moment to, let's do this, let's ask Emily to go first. And anything personally